Good morning from Houston, where the 49ers pass rush was disastrously non existent yesterday. And this is something that threatens the 49ers not only here in 2025, but also beyond. That's why I think that it is time for the 49ers to aggressively pursue a trade. They've got a little bit more than a week to do so, and maybe multiple trades, maybe one trade and a couple signings will do the trick. But San Francisco desperately needs more juice rushing the passer. They did not touch CJ Stroud until after the 2-minute warning of the first half yesterday. And Houston took a lot of snaps. I can tell you that the Texans were talking about how little juice the 49ers had up front. And because of that, they could do whatever they wanted. CJ Stroud looked like an all-pro quarterback. We can go through some of the potential names. I've already talked about the Dolphins who might be available, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, but some less obvious ones. How about somebody like Isaiah McGuire of the Cleveland Browns? The reason that I bring up McGuire is because he's on his rookie contract. He's got one more year left after on his rookie contract. He produced early this season, 11 pressures over the first 3 games, has not been nearly as prolific lately. But remember what the 49ers did in 2021 when they traded with the Houston Texans. They left Houston. I'm about to go to the airport here. They left Houston with a pass rusher without having to go to Houston because all they did was trade with the Texans for Charles Omenihu. Omenihu was on his rookie contract, hadn't produced a whole lot. 49ers got him with another season left on his deal, so they got him for 2021 and 2022. And Charles Omenihu obviously ended up being a player who helped fill in the 49ers pass rush in a really, really big way. I think that Isaiah McGuire is a player with that type of potential, who's on his rookie deal, who's already produced some pressure at the NFL level. And if you plug him into the 49ers system, we know that they have coached up these defensive linemen well over the past, that they've done better under Chris Kasarik than they have done with other teams. If you help him fill that 49ers cupboard, which is insanely bare right now. Remember that Sam Okawanu got hurt yesterday, and the 49ers were already playing with a skeleton crew. Maybe Isaiah McGuire can give the 49ers some juice. You can turn to the Tennessee Titans, where they've got a couple players who would be rentals, but I think that the time for San Francisco to start considering a rental. I know that they want a player that can help them into 2026 under contract for sure, but you've got Arden Key, the former 49er, who was brought in 2021 as a free agent who delivered alongside Charles Omenihu. But you've also got Draymond Jones, who might still have some juice. Good pass rushing grade so far this year for Draymond Jones on what has been a dysfunctional Tennessee team. Former Denver Bronco, former Seattle Seahawk, 29 years old. Maybe he's got some juice left in him. The Titans paid him about $7 or $8 million this year, but most of that money came through signing bonus, so he'd come on the cheap. Arden Key also would come relatively cheap since most of his money on a longer-term deal with the Titans was paid out through a signing bonus, which the 49ers would not need to foot. Now, I know that the Raiders probably won't trade with the 49ers, but it is worth taking a look at Malcolm Kuntz, who signed a one-year deal with the Raiders before this season. Obviously, Las Vegas, not a good team this year. I know that Mark Davis has refused to trade with San Francisco in the past. Most likely trade partner, probably the Miami Dolphins. But there could be an under-the-radar player, a hidden gem that we haven't been talking about. I know that everybody's going to want to talk about Trey Hendrickson and Miles Murphy. Those still seem like longer shots, even though the Bengals did lose to the Jets, because they're only a game out of first place. They're not very good, but they're only a game out of first place in that AFC North, with the Steelers having lost last night. But listen, the 49ers, and I wrote all about this in the San Francisco Standard, the 49ers cannot afford to let the bottom permanently fall out of this defense, and that's what they risk doing. Yesterday was not a good offensive line that they faced. The Texans were the number 30 offensive line in football and pass block win rate. Rarely does a game happen where CJ Stroud doesn't get sacked. That happened yesterday. Rarely does a game happen where a winning team, the 49ers entered at 5-2, and they barely touch the opposing quarterback, because normally you can't get that good of a record if you can't get after the quarterback. But that happened yesterday. And the 49ers have a very unique setup this year, in that they were trying to develop this defense of youngsters. And to do that, to shepherd them along, They had veteran foundational pillars, one at each position group. Nick Bosa along the defensive line, Fred Warner at linebacker, Diamara Lenore in the defensive backfield. Well, the Shepherds are hurt. Warner and Bosa, and we're especially talking about Bosa right now because we're talking about defensive linemen. They might be in the room, they might be in the building, but that they're hurt. They're not on the field with the 49ers, and their production was meant to be a bedrock to support the rookie development. Michael Williams, for example, not a good pass rusher right now. He's not going to win one-on-one. He's a big body. I know he impressed some of the Texans, a big body who's going to set the edge. He's going to set up pass rushing situations. He's going to push the pocket, but he's not going to just take over a game winning one-on-one. That job was supposed to be Nick Bosa's. The Michael Williams, without Bosa, without Yetur Gross-Matos, in a situation where the 49ers also lose Bryce Huff, and he might only be out for a couple games, but still, how can you guarantee that Bryce Huff is going to stay healthy for the rest of the season? So Michael Williams, without that support, it's just a run stopper. That's okay. That's the 49ers drafted him to be in year one, but they intended to have some of these veterans augmenting this situation. They don't have those guys anymore. One of the worst things you could do for Brock Purdy is subject him to weekly track meets because the defense cannot stop a nosebleed. That means Purdy dropping back to pass 40 plus times per game, just trying to keep pace with opposing offenses that just cannot be stopped by the 49ers defense. That seems like a lousy way to protect your biggest investment ever, the $53 million man, Brock Purdy. There is no quarterback in the history of the NFL that is able to win without a competent defense. And it's not just winning without a competent defense. It is keeping things reasonable, keeping things afloat, keeping the culture of a team moving. You want to subject your defensive players, your youngsters on the defensive side of the ball, to a season that inspires some hope and inspires some development and inspires some confidence. You can't have them giving up 41 minutes of possession a game without touching the quarterback while getting roasted on the back end. You can't even work on some of the tighter coverage principles that you want to work on if you don't have a pass rush. So for the sake of the development of the defense, the 49ers need to make sure that they have some juice up front, because that could be a longer reaching negative for San Francisco into 2026 and beyond if they don't get the development work that they get this year. But for the sake of the offense too, I mean, it's something where the offense has to be able to play a game on schedule, not only to stand the best chance of winning and to develop and to instill confidence for the program moving beyond 2025, but also to keep guys healthy, to keep them in reasonable football leverage. You want to be playing the game on an even surface. You don't want to be playing uphill. Preferably, you want to be playing downhill. Might be a lot for the 49ers to ask this year, given the injuries to the defense, but you got to keep things smoothed out. And I think that, up until now, up until they had lost Bryce Huff, and Huff, they kept things together against the Falcons, even though they were skating on thin ice against Atlanta. But up until they had lost Bryce Huff, the 49ers had enough juice to mask what was going on, the deficiency-wise, along the defensive line. Obviously, the offense hogged the ball against the Atlanta Falcons. They were able to run the ball, but Huff was also able to make a couple game-tilting plays, even though, to me, I was talking about it at the time, it seemed fairly obvious that the 49ers were skating on thin ice defensively. Well, they've now lost Huff. He might return soon, but you can't guarantee that he's going to stay healthy. Other defensive linemen also went down yesterday, and Sam Okawanu. I think you've got to do something. Mike mentioned that Yannick Ngakoue is still a free agent. So why don't you kick the tires on some free agents to see if they have any juice left? He might be on his last leg, but it might be worth the try if you're the 49ers, because you got absolutely nothing pass rushing wise out of the defensive line yesterday following that loss of Bryce Huff. And, more than anything, you could talk about future development, but in this league, you got to think about the now. And the 49ers at 5-3 in a wide open NFC. Who's to say they can't make the playoffs and get really good seasoning there at the very least? Maybe they could even win a game or two in the playoffs if they add a little bit of a pass rush? Who's to say that depth on top of Bryce Huff, assuming Huff does return and play a lot moving forward and continue to play at a high level, who's to say that depth can't be a tilting factor in San Francisco's favor? The schedule is soft enough. I mean, I can only think of 3 games where the 49ers will be underdogs moving forward. I can think of the Colts game, I can think of the Rams game, and I can think of the Seahawks game. The other 6, I think the 49ers will be favored. So that they could be 6-3 if they beat the Giants. They're going to be favored to do that next week. And then they'll be favored in 6 of their remaining 9 games. Like this team could absolutely go out there and post a double-digit win record, and then you see where the chips will fall. But you have to have a pass rush in order to do that. Otherwise, you're going to make other quarterbacks look like Johnny Unitas, Peyton Manning, and Tom Brady, all reincarnated. So that's where the 49ers are leaving Houston. I don't think that game requires much deeper analysis. I think that Mac Jones, QB2, without his top 2 wide receivers against the league's number 1 defense, I don't think that result was particularly surprising. I predicted the 49ers would score 17 points. They scored 15. Yeah, offense wasn't good, but even if that side turns it on, that side does need to turn it on, they're going to need a better defensive performance than the one that they managed against the mediocre Texans offense that made C.J. Stroud look a lot better than he is. So the trade deadline is next Tuesday, November 4th. See if the 49ers make some moves before then. I think that for both the short term and the long term, it is necessary now. And maybe that pushes the 49ers to pay a little bit extra, to offer an overpay by the books, because, well, they've encountered an unprecedented injury situation. I get it. But maybe the response to an unprecedented injury situation is an unprecedented player acquisition session. I think the 49ers are going to be a test case for that, because right now, when you're looking at a 5-3 team with such an anemic pass rush, you got to say something needs to happen from the personnel standpoint.